Adventures with Superman, season 3. Yes, season 3, episode 10, season finale, The Return of the House of L. And it's that kind of back with a DC, with HBO Max Adult Swim animated television review for you, going over the season finale of that Superman. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end. Before we get started, hit the notification bell, like it or subscribe. There wasn't a lot of dialogue in this one. This one was like 99.9% action. The episode starts. It starts where Clark was in the Fortress of Solitude and he was going back and forth with the Kaluan robots, and then they had taken over the Bizarro caveman Superman, and then he punched Clark in the back of the head. Clark was about to, I guess, be eradicated. So I mean, but in the end, like, what happened was the Bizarro Superman ended up going crazy. He started attacking everybody, and then he went after the robots. Right before he went after the robots, Clark embraced him, and he was just like, "Hey, buddy, it's okay." And then he calmed him down and talked him off the ledge. The robots were just like, "Oh, you stepped in front of in front of us to save us. Why would you save us? Like, we're beneath you." And then he was just like, "No." He said that nobody's beneath anybody. Everybody deserves to live. And then that's when the robots, they were just like, "Oh, we get it now." They said that kindness and compassion, that's your strength. And then they bowed down to him, and they were just like, "Oh, you are the last king of Krypton." And then Clark put his hand out, and he was like, "Get up," because he was like, "Nobody bows anymore." So then he was just like, "All right, how do I get my powers back?" So they told him, they said that, because he said that, he's like, "I've been getting these visions, and if you weren't the ones that called me, then who called me?" Apparently, the god of Rao, praise Rao, was the one that was sending those telepathic messages to Superman, because Rao is basically like the sun god that the Kryptonians pray to, and a piece of that sun god was in the Fortress of Solitude, and Clark was using that, to basically, that's how the fortress is powered and everything, because of the sun god Rao. So Rao telepathically called out. It'd be cool if, like, the Martian Manhunter was in there, it was like in the sun thing somewhere, but he called out to Clark, so Clark could come back and get his power. So they were just like, if there's a chance that you can get your power back, or if there's a chance that you could be destroyed, like, here's your chance. So what you gonna do? So he ended up walking up to Rao, and then he decided to make a choice. Back on Earth, the rest of the team is getting eradicated because they're getting their asses handed to them by the Eradicator, who said that he's traveled through different timelines, different dimensions, and every single timeline he kills the entire super family, but there's always one person that survives, whether it's a sibling, a lover, a child. Somebody survives and creates a new timeline, and then he has to come through and, like, kill everybody all over again. And he's like, but every time he does that, like, he evolves. So he's whooping ass, like, on all three members, like on Kara, on Laura, like on Jonathan. There was a moment where, because remember we were talking about before, where Clark had tapped into, like, some internal power where, like, he basically just, the adrenaline started kicking in, his eyes turned red, and he tapped into some power that he never knew that he had that made him stronger. Kara tapped into that same power. And she needs to be careful, because when Clark tapped into that power and overexerted himself, he blew a fuse and basically, like, lost his power. Kara was very close to doing that. And then even Laura and Jonathan, because Laura saw Kara tapping into that power, and then Laura focused, Jonathan focused, all of them were able to tap into that power, and they were able to fight the robots. But then the Eradicator, I said he was whooping everybody's ass, and then they were just like, "Oh, you may have destroyed, like, my underlings, but you'll never destroy me because you're not enough." And then, Superman showed up to basically kick some ass because he got his power back, and he got a whole new suit that looked dope as fuck. Waller, at one point, she was like, "Yo, we out this bitch," because she was like, the Eradicator's gonna win. Lois said she wasn't going to go, and then Waller was like, "Fine, whatever." But for some reason, she was very adamant about taking Jimmy with her. And I don't understand why she cared that much about taking Jimmy. Because Jimmy was just like, "No, I want to stay too." And they forced him on the plane. But while he was on the plane, he was on the plane with Lex. And then Lex said that he thinks that he could stop the Eradicator. And then, Jimmy was just like, "Well, if you think you could do it, do it." So then the plane that they were on crashed. Slade found him. He told Slade, he was like, "Look, I can probably stop him, but you can't take us to Waller. You got to let us go so I can try to stop him." And I'm like, why is Jimmy this important? Because he said that you can't take us. Because even Waller called Slade on the phone, and then she was just like, "Olsen and Luthor, they're still out there. Make sure you find them and bring them back." I'm like, why do we care this much about James? Like, why are we giving this much of a damn, like to the Waller plan? Like, Jimmy's not that important, but apparently he is, because Waller was like, I'm like, "Is this like your nephew or something?" I don't know. Like that, it was just very weird. So then Slade let him go, and then when Slade let him go, Luthor put his helmet on because remember the Eradicator was supposed to share he was supposed to share a mind, a part of like Lex's brain. So Lex basically turned his machine up to like a jillion, and then he was able to mentally control the Eradicator for a certain period of time. But then the Eradicator was like, well, if you can get, and he called him father. He was like, if you can get into my mind, that means I can get into yours. And then he used his power to kind of like like cook Lex's brain. So like Lex stopped him for like a good 5-10 minutes, but then like he regained control. So Superman shows up, and then after that, like he ended up bringing the Bizarro Superman with him. He called him cousin. So I guess like he's part of the family now, and he's gonna live on the farm. Like they called him cousin. So now he got two cousins. He got the Bizarro Superman. Because it's like I don't even want to call him Bizarro. He's not Bizarro. Like I said, he's more like a caveman, like Superman. So like he's in the fight now, so everybody's in the fight, and he even tapped into that, like red-eyed Krypton. Although his was purple, like his Laura, Lana, like Laura, Jonathan, and the Bizarro, theirs was purple, but Clark's and Kara's, theirs was red. Like their eyes were red. So they tapped into all that power. They fought the Eradicator. Clark basically told the Eradicator, he was like, look, he said, the sad part about you is, he said, everything that you've done for the sake of like anger and frustration. He was like, you don't know love. You don't know friendship. Like you've never been able to embrace humanity. And then after that, Clark basically like he tapped into that power one last time that turned him yellow. And then he eradicated the Eradicator. And then when it was over, the Eradicator was laying on the floor, like he was just like, like you defeated me. And then Clark put his hand out, and he was like, it's time to stand, put an end to the fighting, and it's time to, basically bury the hatchet. And then he hit him with the Black Manta. He was like, never. He was like, I would rather die. And then the Eradicator turned into dust, and like that was it. And then Clark lost the suit, like the new suit, because it was armor. He lost the new suit, and then he had his regular suit on. Then everybody embraced, everybody hugged, everybody loves each other. Clark had a heart-to-heart with Jonathan. He told Jonathan, stop being a bitch. Like, it's not about you, it's about the family. And then he was like, I miss you, Dad, and everything. It's just weird. Like, I wish there was more dialogue between Laura and Kara. Like, they didn't really, they spoke of each other. They never really talked to each other. Like the two of them never actually sat down and had like a whole conversation. Waller put Lex in jail, and then she asked Lex, she was like, why did you do all this to begin with? And then he said that he had tapped into a satellite and saw some shit that he shouldn't have saw, and whatever he saw, it scared him to the point where he wanted to get rid of the Kryptonians by any means necessary. I can only assume what he saw had something to do with Darkseid and or Apocalypse, because what else would scare you to that end? And then after that, the family was there. They ended up getting like the bracelets to send, Laura and John back to their time. They went back to their time. Everything's fine. Jimmy and Kara never resolved their love situation because Jimmy told her that he wanted to be the best friend that she could be. Kara takes everything literal, so she was just like, so when Jimmy was just like, like I'm here to, give you like my love, my all, my attention. She was like, yes, your friendship, because that's what you said you wanted, to be the best friend that you could be. Like he put himself in the friend zone. So honestly, we didn't need them. We didn't need, if this whole thing was going to end with the two of them not becoming a couple, we didn't need all of that from them throughout the course of the entire season. Maybe an episode or two, but not the entire season. But on the bright side, Jimmy, he rich again, because he said that the comic books that he sold, he ended up making money off of those comic books. He used that money to invest into that dating app. And then when he invested into the dating app, like that's how he became rich again. So Jimmy got his money back. So, and then that was weird because the way that the show was ending, and then it ended with everybody on the farm together. And then after that, Lois, who, this makes sense because Lois, who was terrified of the idea of marriage, of family, of having children, she realized after seeing her children, like she came to the realization, she was just like, no, she said family's actually the way to go. And then she asked Clark to marry her, which does make sense for the Lois Lane character because she's very like, strong, independent woman. So she wouldn't be afraid to ask him, to marry. But she came around because in the beginning she was like, I'm too young. I don't want to have kids. I don't want to marry you. This, that, third. And now she's like, yo, will you marry me? So, and then that's how it ended with the two of them basically being married. And then showing like little bobblehead figurines of Kara, Jimmy, Lois, everybody on the farm together. And like, that's how it ended. Thank you for tuning in. And it kind of felt like the way the show ended, it ended as though the writers, like the creators of My Adventures of Superman, they were just like, if we're allowed to continue to a season 4, we're going to tap into what Lex saw, And then even with Rao, because Clark said to Lois, he said that when Rao gave me my power back, I had to pay a price. And then she was like, well, what was the price? They showed a scene of Clark basically in front of Rao. Rao was blasting him with the sunlight. And then he said, whatever the price was, it was worth paying. But I'm like, we never actually saw what you paid. Like, what did you actually pay? Like, I don't. So if we get a season 4, we're either going to find out the price that Clark paid, or we're going to find out what Lex saw on the satellite. But in case they don't get renewed, and in case the show does not come back, the show ended with everyone being together, loving, happy, and everything. Lois and Clark are getting married. And if the show ends like that, then we're just like, hey, the show's over. Lois and Clark got married in the series finale. So it's like, we're kind of good either way. So, and I think that was the best thing that they could do, because they're not guaranteed to get a season 4 because it's not part of like the James Gunn universe. So if he's going to allow that to continue, that's up to him. But as an overall, I mean, I like the fact that it was an action-packed finale, so I definitely can't complain about that. And there's really nothing left to say about it. Like, let's say they even gave Jimmy his money back. Like, they gave Jimmy like his billions back. So they kind of like I said, the show is set up to where everybody's going to be good regardless if the show continues or not. So share your questions, comments, and concerns. What did you think about My Adventures with Superman? Do you want to see it continue? Are you satisfied if this is what we're going to end with? And let's talk about it in the comments section. Check me out all over X, on Twitter, on TikTok, and Instagram, where you can leave those questions, comments, and concerns. Check out my season finale for X-Men 97. I got the season finale up for that, and I'm still doing Batman Cape Crusader. I got my review for Spider-Man Brand New Day up on my channel. Like I said, and Green Lanterns comes out as I'm recording this. It comes out tonight as I'm recording this, so give me like 2 or 3 days for that, and then we're gonna bust out that Lanterns. So that was it, guys. So thanks for tuning in for an action-packed My Adventures with Superman season 3 and hopefully season 4. Up away as always, and until then, hopefully we're out this. Yeah!